After my father brought up the subject of his will, my older sister became utterly convinced that I wasn't a biological member of the family and went as far as to replace my DNA test results. But the overwhelming evidence she sought ultimately demolished her elaborate web of lies. I am 28 years old, and my sister, Olivia, is 31. For most of our lives, we've shared what I would describe as a perfectly decent relationship. We weren't inseparable best friends, but we always got along well enough during family holidays and would exchange the occasional text message, the standard sort of connection you expect between siblings. Our father is a man of considerable means, having built a highly successful contracting business from the ground up. Our mother passed away 8 years ago after a long battle with cancer. About 6 months ago, Dad started mentioning his intentions to update his will. It wasn't anything dramatic or alarming. He simply explained that he wanted to get his affairs in order, perhaps setting up a few trusts to make things smoother down the line. It's a completely natural consideration for a man in his early 60s who is beginning to think about retirement and the legacy he wants to leave behind. As Olivia and I are his only children, the assumption was that his assets would be divided between us. It was from that point forward that Olivia's entire demeanor toward me shifted. I mean a complete 180-degree transformation. She went from being my normal, predictable sister to someone I could barely recognize, a person filled with suspicion and a cold unfriendliness. She began making these incredibly bizarre, passive-aggressive comments about how I never quite seemed to fit in with the rest of the family, how I'd always been the odd one out. The first time she voiced something like this, we were having dinner at our dad's house. She was looking through old family photographs on his fireplace mantel and picked up a picture of me as a newborn. She stared at it for an unsettlingly long time before remarking, "You know, you really don't look like either mom or dad in this picture, do you?" I tried to shrug it off, because honestly, what good are newborn photos for determining family resemblance? All infants look like tiny, wrinkly potatoes, but she wouldn't let it go. "No, I'm serious," she insisted. "Look at your nose. And your eyes. Where did those features even come from?" She held the photograph right up to my face for comparison. Dad was in the kitchen at the time and didn't overhear this strange interrogation, but a deep sense of unease was already beginning to settle in my stomach. I told her she was being weird and pointed out that plenty of children don't look exactly like their parents. I mean, genetics is a complex lottery, isn't it? You might inherit your great-grandmother's chin or your uncle's eye shape. But Olivia just gave me this penetrating look, as if she had caught me in a lie. What truly started to bother me was how she began to voice these suspicions to other family members. At our cousin's birthday party last month, I overheard her telling our aunt that she had always sensed something was off about me. When she realized I was within earshot, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just gave a little shrug and walked away. The strangest part of all this is her sudden, intense fixation on genetics and inheritance scandals. She constantly brings up stories about families torn apart by shocking discoveries made through DNA testing. She has emailed me no fewer than 3 separate articles about individuals who found out they were adopted, or that their biological father was not the man who raised them. She repeatedly emphasizes how DNA doesn't lie, and how science can finally reveal the truth about family connections. Last week, She cornered me at Dad's house and outright asked if I had ever given any thought to my biological parents. I was so stunned I didn't know how to respond. When I asked her what on earth she meant, she just said she'd been thinking a lot about family genetics lately and how different I was from everyone else. I attempted to talk to Dad about Olivia's behavior, but I didn't want to go into too much detail because the whole thing sounds certifiably insane when you say it out loud. I just mentioned that Olivia seemed very stressed lately and had been saying some odd things. He said he'd noticed she was more intense recently, but had chalked it up to pressure from her job. The thing that is really messing with my head is Olivia's absolute, unwavering conviction in whatever narrative she has constructed. She doesn't seem to be acting out of malice or just trying to stir up drama. She appears genuinely convinced that a massive secret about my parentage is being kept from her. But here is the one thing I know with absolute certainty. I am my father's biological son. I have his hands, his laugh, and his tendency to get irrationally angry at inanimate objects that fail to work properly. I have my mother's stubborn streak and her strangely double-jointed thumbs. I am a mosaic of both of them. I'm starting to seriously wonder if Olivia is having some sort of mental health crisis. The timing, right after Dad mentioned his will, feels too coincidental to be ignored. Is she so consumed with anxiety about her inheritance that she has pathologically convinced herself I am not legitimate family? Is this some kind of delayed psychological reaction to Mom's death that is only now bubbling to the surface? I have no idea what to do. Olivia's behavior is escalating, not improving. She started making comments about DNA testing and uncovering the truth in front of Dad. He just laughs it off, but I can see in his eyes that he's starting to sense something is seriously wrong with her. Any advice on how to handle this would be immensely appreciated, because I am completely at a loss. First update. So, remember how I mentioned my sister's obsession with DNA testing and family genetics? Well, she decided to escalate her private hobby into a full-blown family project. Just a few days after my original post, Olivia showed up at Dad's house armed with what looked like a corporate presentation on genealogy and family history. She had printed out articles on the benefits of DNA testing, guides to family tree research, and charts explaining genetic genealogy. She pitched it as this wonderful bonding activity, an opportunity for our entire extended family to collaborate on building a comprehensive family tree, all verified through DNA analysis. Her presentation was, I have to admit, impressively thorough. She had researched different testing companies, compared their accuracy rates, and evaluated the size of their databases for genealogical matching. She spoke passionately about how we could connect with distant relatives, trace our family's migration patterns, and maybe even solve some long-standing family mysteries about our great-great-grandparents. Dad was hooked immediately. He has always been fascinated by family history and has talked for years about wanting to properly trace our ancestry. Olivia had done her homework perfectly. She knew exactly which buttons to push to pique his interest. She talked about discovering potential links to historical figures or learning about the villages our ancestors immigrated from in Europe. But here is the part that made my skin crawl. Olivia stressed that for the project to be a success, everyone needed to participate. She explained that the DNA comparisons would only be meaningful if we had samples from multiple generations and different branches of the family. She also specifically highlighted how crucial it was for both Dad and me to participate, as we represented the direct paternal line. She made it all sound so logical and scientific. She went on and on about how DNA testing technology had advanced to the point where it could reveal astonishing insights into family relationships and genetic inheritance patterns. She spun tales of families discovering famous ancestors or finding long-lost relatives they never knew existed. The most devious part was how she framed the entire thing as a gift for Dad. She announced that her plan was to create this beautiful, framed family tree as a surprise for his upcoming birthday, complete with the DNA analysis and historical research. She presented herself as the thoughtful, loving daughter wanting to honor her father's passion for history. Dad bought it completely, hook, line, and sinker. He started reminiscing about how much Mom would have loved a project like this, and how wonderful it would be to finally have answers to some of the gaps in our family history. He enthusiastically agreed to participate and immediately began calling other relatives to get them on board. Olivia managed the entire operation with chilling efficiency. She handled all the logistics, ordered all the testing kits, and coordinated with every family member. She appointed herself the project manager, insisting that she personally collect all the samples to ensure they were handled correctly and shipped to the lab together. Within a week, she had secured commitments from Dad, me, our 2 aunts, 3 cousins, and Dad's elderly uncle. Everyone was genuinely excited about the project. Our aunt even started digging through old photo albums and documents to contribute to the research. But I know exactly what this is truly about. Olivia couldn't care less about genealogy or family history. This is her elaborate, manipulative scheme to prove that I am not Dad's biological son. She is banking on the idea that when all the DNA results come back, mine will be the one that shows no genetic link to the rest of the family. Instead of making a direct accusation or confronting me privately, she has concocted this intricate plot that makes her look like the thoughtful, organized daughter while simultaneously backing me into a corner where I can't refuse to participate without looking deeply suspicious. If I object to the DNA test, it will look like I have something to hide. If I call out her true motive, I will sound paranoid and defensive. She has trapped me, and my only option is to play along with her twisted game and pray that the DNA results will finally, definitively shut down her delusional theory. The hardest part is watching Dad get so excited about this. He calls me every few days to share some new fact Olivia has discovered about genealogy research or to speculate about the family connections we might uncover. He has no idea that his daughter is weaponizing his hobby to try and prove that his son is not his own flesh and blood. I just keep telling myself that this is all going to backfire on her spectacularly when the results prove I am, without a doubt, Dad's son. Olivia will be forced to admit that her entire theory was baseless, and hopefully, this dangerous obsession will finally end. Second update. Olivia was in charge of coordinating every single aspect of this DNA project. Consequently, all the test kits were delivered to her apartment. She sent a message to our family group chat announcing that the kits had arrived and that she would be distributing them so everyone could provide their samples. She explained her plan to collect them all at once and mail them to the lab as a single batch, supposedly to ensure they were all processed together. I was originally scheduled to go to her place yesterday to pick up my kit, but a last-minute work emergency forced me to reschedule. I texted her to let her know I would swing by today to grab it instead. She replied that it was fine and that she would leave it with her roommate if she wasn't home. This afternoon, I drove over to Olivia's apartment. Her roommate let me in, explaining that Olivia was out running errands but had left my test kit for me on the kitchen counter. Sure enough, there were 2 test kits sitting on the countertop. I grabbed one and was about to leave when something caught my eye. The box had already been opened. This immediately raised a red flag, as these kits are meant to remain sealed until you are ready to use them to prevent contamination. I opened the box to check if all the components were inside, and that's when I saw it. Someone had already spit into the saliva collection tube. I just stood there, staring at this tube for what felt like 5 minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. The collection tube was supposed to be completely empty. The instructions are clear. I was supposed to spit into it, seal it, and send it to the lab. But this tube already contained saliva. My initial thought was that Olivia had accidentally given me someone else's completed kit. Maybe she had mixed up the boxes and handed me a relative's sample by mistake. But then I looked through the paperwork inside the box, and it was clear that my name was printed on every single form. That's when the horrifying realization hit me. Olivia was planning to submit someone else's DNA sample under my name. I immediately called her to ask what was going on with my test kit. She feigned confusion, asking what I was talking about. I told her that the collection tube was already full of saliva and that all the forms had my name on them. There was a long, telling silence on the other end of the line. Then she let out a forced laugh and said it was all just a practical joke. She claimed she was just testing me to see if I would notice and that she was impressed that I caught it. She said she had filled the tube with her own saliva as a prank and that she had my real, unopened test kit waiting for me. I told her in no uncertain terms that it wasn't funny and that tampering with DNA samples was not a joke. She just kept insisting it was all in good fun. When I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I called her back and demanded to know whose DNA was really in that collection tube. She tried to brush it off again, but I wouldn't let up. Finally, she broke down and admitted she had asked her friend Jessica to provide the sample. Jessica is Olivia's coworker. I've met her maybe twice at office parties. She is, in no way, related to our family. If Jessica's DNA had been submitted under my name, the results would have shown zero genetic connection to Dad or any of our other relatives. I confronted Olivia directly, asking her why she would do something so deceitful. Why would she try to submit a stranger's DNA under my name? What could she possibly hope to achieve? That's when she dropped the pretense that it was all a joke. She said she needed to know the truth about my parentage and that she was acting to protect Dad's best interests. She argued that if I were really Dad's son, I should have no fear of taking the test properly. But if I had something to hide, this would bring it to light. Her logic was completely twisted and made no sense. She seemed to believe that by submitting a fraudulent DNA sample under my name, she would somehow expose me as a fraud. As if the fake results proving I was unrelated to the family would retroactively make her adoption theory true. I tried to explain to her how insane this was. I told her that submitting someone else's DNA would only prove that Jessica is not related to our family, something we already knew. It would prove absolutely nothing about my actual genetic relationship with Dad. But Olivia wasn't listening to reason. She was convinced that I was hiding something, and that my angry reaction to her scheme was proof that I was afraid of the truth. She said that if I were truly Dad's biological son, I should have no problem taking the DNA test legitimately. I assured her that I would take the test, but that I wanted a brand new sealed kit that she had never touched. I told her I would be ordering my own test directly from the lab and submitting it myself to guarantee there was no tampering. Olivia flew into a rage, accusing me of being paranoid and of sabotaging her wonderful family genealogy project. She claimed everyone was so excited about the research and that I was ruining it for everyone with my suspicious behavior. I pointed out that she was the one acting suspiciously by trying to submit fraudulent DNA samples, but she just kept deflecting, insisting I was overreacting to what she now called a harmless prank. She hung up on me when I told her I was going to tell Dad what she had tried to do. A moment later, she texted me, begging me not to involve Dad and promising not to interfere with my real DNA sample if I just let it go. I am not letting this go. Olivia attempted to commit fraud. This has gone far beyond a weird suspicion about my parentage. I ordered my own DNA test kit directly from the lab today. I will submit my own sample, and I will get my own legitimate results that will prove I am Dad's son. This is so much worse than I ever imagined. Third update. The DNA results came back, and just as expected, I am unequivocally my father's biological child. However, Olivia's reaction to this definitive proof has been so completely unhinged that I'm now genuinely concerned for her mental health. Because I had ordered my kit individually and directly from the lab, my results came in first, while Olivia was still coordinating the collection for the family's batch testing. The results were precisely what I knew they would be. A 50% genetic match with Dad, clear genetic links to our aunts and cousins, and an ancestral background from Europe that aligns perfectly with our known family history. Everything was a perfect fit for someone who is an integral part of this family. I felt a profound sense of relief to have scientific confirmation of something I had never once doubted. My hope was that this would finally put an end to Olivia's bizarre adoption conspiracy theory and allow us all to move on from this whole nightmarish fiasco. I made the decision to show the results to Olivia before telling the rest of the family. I thought, perhaps naively, that this would give her an opportunity to acknowledge her mistake and maybe even apologize for the accusations and the attempted sabotage. That was a huge miscalculation. When I presented Olivia with my DNA results, she just stared at the report for a long time without saying a word. Then she began to grill me with a barrage of detailed questions about the testing process. Where did I order the kit from? How exactly did I submit my sample? Was I absolutely certain the lab didn't mix up the samples? Had anyone else handled my test kit at any point? I explained calmly that I had ordered the kit directly from the company's official website, submitted the sample myself, and had tracked the entire process to ensure there was absolutely no possibility of contamination or a mix-up. The results were undeniably accurate. Olivia's response was to accuse me of faking the test. She claimed the results couldn't possibly be valid because she knew for a fact that I wasn't Dad's biological child. She insisted that I must have found some way to manipulate the testing process to produce a fraudulent outcome. I asked her what possible evidence she had to support this belief, and she started listing off the most random, nonsensical things. She mentioned that I hold my fork differently than Dad does. She claimed my laugh sounds forced when I'm around relatives, and she believes I've always been too eager to fit in with the family, which she says proves I don't truly belong. This was utterly insane reasoning. She was twisting perfectly normal human behaviors into supposed evidence of a massive, lifelong deception about my parentage. But then it got worse. Olivia has now decided that everyone in the family needs to retake their DNA tests at a completely different lab. She claims she no longer trusts the company we used and insists that we need independent verification of the data from a second testing provider. She has been calling our family members one by one to pitch her new plan. She's explaining to them that DNA testing can sometimes be unreliable, and that best practices dictate that results should always be confirmed by multiple labs. The most manipulative part is how she is framing all of this for Dad. She is not telling him that she thinks I'm adopted or that she tried to sabotage my first test. Instead, she is portraying herself as a diligent, meticulous researcher who simply wants to ensure that our family genealogy project is based on the most accurate information possible. And Dad thinks this is a reasonable course of action. He remains unaware of Olivia's core delusion or her sabotage attempt, so to him, this just looks like Olivia being extra thorough. He has agreed to take another test and has encouraged other family members to participate in this expanded research. Olivia has already ordered a new set of test kits from a different company. She is once again organizing the collection process, which makes me incredibly nervous after her previous attempt at sabotage. This time, however, I will make certain that Dad is physically present when I provide my sample, and I will take photos of the sealed kit to document the chain of custody. The infuriating part is that I know the new results will only confirm what we already know. I will once again test as Dad's biological son, because that is the reality. Yet, Olivia seems utterly convinced that a different lab will somehow produce results that validate her adoption fantasy. I'm starting to believe that Olivia has developed some kind of psychological disorder centered on my parentage. She has created this elaborate conspiracy theory in her mind, and now she rejects any piece of evidence that contradicts it. When reality doesn't align with her beliefs, she concludes that reality must be the thing that is wrong. I am so tempted to just tell Dad everything, but I'm worried he won't believe me. Olivia's actions seem so rational on the surface that my accusations might sound like the ravings of a madman. She has also been very careful not to explicitly voice her adoption theory in front of Dad. I think my best course of action is to go along with this second round of testing and let the data speak for itself, again. When a new lab confirms that I am Dad's biological son, Olivia will be faced with the undeniable truth that multiple independent tests have all produced the same result. This entire situation has evolved from merely annoying to genuinely frightening. I'm no longer just dealing with sibling rivalry or inheritance anxiety. I believe my sister is in the throes of a serious psychological crisis, and her obsession is focused on proving I am not part of this family. Fourth and final update. I told my dad everything, and as a result, Olivia is no longer a part of my life. This entire situation has imploded in ways I never could have predicted, and I am honestly just relieved that it's finally over. The second round of DNA tests came back with results that were identical to the first round. Shocking, I know. I am still my father's biological son, still genetically linked to all of our relatives, and I still have the same ancestral markers. The new findings were essentially a photocopy of my first test. Faced with identical data from two independent, reputable labs, I expected Olivia would finally have to accept reality. Instead, she doubled down harder than ever before. She immediately began researching DNA testing accuracy rates, finding obscure articles about rare laboratory errors. She started floating the theory that both labs had somehow made the exact same mistake, or that there was some kind of systemic contamination that was specifically affecting my samples. However, she reached her breaking point when she started contacting other family members directly with her adoption theory. Previously, she had kept her suspicions relatively contained. But after the second set of test results confirmed I was Dad's son, she apparently decided that subtlety was no longer an option. She called our cousin Mark and told him she had serious doubts about my parentage and that she believed Dad was deluding himself about having a biological son. She asked Mark to help her convince Dad to demand a third round of testing at a lab that she would personally select and oversee. This conversation completely baffled Mark. He immediately called Dad and told him that Olivia seemed to be having some sort of breakdown over the family DNA project and was making bizarre claims about me being adopted. Dad called me right away and asked what in the world was going on. I knew at that moment I couldn't protect Olivia from her own actions anymore. She had escalated to involving our extended family in her delusions, and Dad deserved to know the full truth about what his daughter had been up to. So, I told him everything. The months of suspicious comments, the passive-aggressive adoption implications, and her manipulation of the family genealogy project as a tool to expose my supposed false paternity. Dad listened to the entire story in complete, stunned silence. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line, and then he just said, "She's been trying to prove you're not my son." Why would she do that? I told him I believed it was all connected to his will, and that Olivia seemed to be trying to disqualify me from my inheritance. Dad went very quiet and then said he needed to speak with Olivia immediately. The confrontation did not go well. Dad summoned her to his house and asked her directly if she was questioning my parentage and trying to prove I was adopted. Olivia denied it at first, but when Dad brought up the DNA test sabotage and her phone calls to other family members, she must have realized there was no point in lying anymore. She confessed that she did not believe I was Dad's biological son and had been trying to prove it for months. She claimed she was doing it to protect Dad's interests and to ensure his legacy went to his true child. She had the audacity to say she was doing it out of love and loyalty to him. Dad asked her what possible evidence she had for this belief, and Olivia started repeating the same ludicrous observations she had made to me. She also brought up distorted childhood memories that she now claimed were inconsistent with me being his biological child. Dad told her that her evidence was utterly ridiculous and that she was trying to destroy her brother's relationship with his family based on nothing more than an obsessive fantasy. He told her he was ashamed of her actions and that he couldn't comprehend how she had allowed herself to become so cruel. Olivia burst into tears, insisting that she was right about me, that the DNA tests were flawed, and that Dad was being deceived. She begged him to do one more round of tests at a lab she would personally vet. That's when Dad lost his temper. He told Olivia she was being delusional and that her obsession with disproving my parentage had done irreparable damage to our family. He said he couldn't trust her anymore and that he didn't want her in his life until she sought professional help for whatever psychological issues were causing this behavior. Olivia left Dad's house that day and has not spoken to either of us since. She has blocked my number and all of my social media profiles. She has apparently blocked Dad as well, as he says his calls go straight to voicemail and his texts show as undelivered. Dad later asked me why I hadn't told him about Olivia's behavior sooner. I explained that I kept hoping she would snap out of it, and that I didn't want to create a family crisis over what I initially thought was just temporary paranoia. But Dad said he was glad I finally told him the truth, because Olivia's behavior was clearly escalating and could have gotten much worse if left unchecked. Dad is adamant that Olivia needs professional help before he will even consider having a relationship with her again. He has relayed through other family members that he is willing to pay for therapy if she agrees to address what is driving this behavior, but there will be no contact until she can admit that her adoption theory was a delusion. As for me, I am done with Olivia for good. I don't care if she gets help or if she ever admits she was wrong. She spent months actively trying to undermine my relationship with my father and sever me from my own family. She attempted to commit fraud by submitting a fake DNA sample in my name. She tried to enlist our relatives in her campaign against me. Dad has mentioned that he is rethinking several elements of his estate plan. He won't give me specifics, but I have a strong feeling that Olivia's inheritance status has been significantly altered. He said that trust and loyalty are major factors in how he views his family legacy. I know some people might think I should forgive Olivia if she gets help and apologizes, but I have no interest in reconciliation. Some betrayals cut too deep. She tried to erase me from my own family. There is no coming back from that.